Ooh, welcome back, Weebies and Weebies, to the channel of the Double Shin Doge, where today we'll be doing something, once again, a bit different. XP Mod, a modded server for Left 4 Dead 2, which has been an absolute blasphemy to play and has basically replaced the original game. And you know that's high praise, because of course, Left 4 Dead 2 is a classic. Now, I know this is a bit of a jump in content for me, but of course, this content's never really been consistent here. And if I was going to start making high effort content, honestly, I might make it on this. Because like I play this mod a whole lot. It's what I have the most hours in on my PC on Steam. I have about 210 hours in Left 4 Dead 2, which is almost all in the mod, or there's some in the vanilla game, and that's only just from this Christmas. As well as that, because it is a mod of such an old game, it seems like it's a nice niche for me to go for, because of course there's not really much YouTube content out there for this mod, so it seems like a perfect niche for me to fill. You may be thinking though, oh, I don't know what this mod's all about. But I imagine most of you at least know what Left 4 Dead's all about. Even if you don't know everything about it, you can have a general idea what it's like. I might make a video just talking about Left 4 Dead 2 in general, if there are not enough people watching who actually know about Left 4 Dead. There are a lot of other videos that are good to introducing new people to Left 4 Dead out there already. So this one's going to focus on introducing you to XP Mod specifically. I'm going to be telling you what all the characters do in XP Mod as well, so even if you already know about XP Mod, this might be a helpful video, because I know there's a lot of people in XP Mod who have just kind of figured things out as they're gone, and they don't actually know everything the characters do. And this series of videos is going to cover everything that everyone does. Alright then, let's jump into it. First of all, let's start with the survivors. There are 6 different survivors that you can pick at the start of every game of XP Mod. You may think 6, there should be 8, because of course there's the Left 4 Dead 2 crew and the Left 4 Dead 1 crew. Well, this mod is still in development as we speak, even though it has been in development for a while. I'm pretty sure it's a one-man project. Obviously, it's not really their job, they just do it for the fun of it. So, Zoe and Francis are not yet added. However, every other character has been added, and obviously they're working on Zoe and Francis. So, that means there are 6 survivors for you to pick from. The first one is Bill, but before we get into what he does, I'll just give you a quick overview of how leveling even works in XP Mod, because it's called XP Mod, you might have guessed, there's experience in it. Now, to be honest, I think at this point, the experience isn't that important to the experience of playing XP Mod, because you will get to the maximum level of level 30 very quickly. I imagine. It doesn't seem to take very long. You play 1 or 2 campaigns and you'll be at full level. And that means you'll have the full capabilities that anyone else on the server that knows what they're doing would. Once you get all these levels, you will be able to use everything that the survivors and the infected give you, all the bonuses they give you in the mod. The menus can be a little bit confusing with their descriptions of how things work. That's because the mod has been changed a lot in the past. It used to be that every single survivor had 6 different abilities you could invest your levels into, and each infected had 3 different ones you could invest your levels into. And when you leveled up, you could spend your levels in those abilities. However, this was later changed, I think just to make it more simple for new players, so that automatically it evenly spends all your levels, which means if you're a level 30, you will have 5 levels in all 6 talents that a survivor could have. And if you're infected, then you'll have 10 levels in all the 3 talents that you can have, just automatically. And sadly, you cannot change that, which I think is a bit of a shame. I never played when you were able to change that. But just to explain, because some of the descriptions word for word in the menus can be a bit confusing without that context. You could easily think when it says it does this much more per level, that means it does 30 times more if you're level 30. No, it means it does 5 times more if you're for the survivors, because it's 30 divided by 6, because it's the 30 levels split across the 6 talents. In fact, just before we get into the meat of this, I feel like I should give a bit more context about XP Mod. I thought at first I wouldn't, because a lot of it is just like the normal game, but just with new abilities. However, there are some things that are different. One of the main things is that to access the mod, you type in XPM in the chat, and it will bring up some menus that you can navigate just using the numbers on your keyboard, and you can select your characters. When you're a survivor, you pick just 1. When you're a zombie, you can pick 3 different infected that you want to be your classes. Obviously, because you can change characters as a zombie mid-game. But sadly, you cannot have all characters, all different zombies as one of your classes, so at least 3 of the zombies that you end up with will have to have no special modded abilities. Although, on the bright side, you won't get stuck with having to deal with these unmodded zombies for the most part, because you can almost always choose which zombie you want in XP Mod. I say almost always, you don't just pick whichever one you want quite. You can cycle through other zombies by right-clicking when you haven't spawned yet as a zombie, However, you cannot be the same zombie you picked your last life as a zombie, and you cannot pick a zombie that someone else already is. So, you know, you can't have two boomers at once, and if you're a boomer your last life, you can't pick boomer again. You have to be something different. But besides that, you can be whichever zombie you want whenever you want. And that obviously means that you can always be using your classes as long as you choose to always use your classes. But as well as that, there is also another thing to consider, which is equipment. If you're playing as a survivor, then not only do you get to choose your character, but you get to choose your starting equipment. You get to choose which gun you start with from any gun in the game. You get to choose whether you start with a med kit or incendiary ammo or explosive ammo or a defib. You get to choose whether you start with pills or adrenaline. You get to choose whether you start with a Molotov, pipe bomb, pile bomb, all that kind of stuff. So this does mean that, to be fair, I'd say the one drawback to XP mod is that definitely the whole resource collecting and going on side paths to grab stuff is a less important factor in XP mod, because you will rarely need those supplies. You will get a medkit right at the start. The game is so fast paced that it's hard enough to find a point to stop and heal, so you probably won't get the chance to use multiple medkits. Your weapons that you'll start with are already probably going to be the best weapons you could pick for that character. Going off to side paths is probably discouraged in this mod, which is probably one of the only downsides of it, but that does allow it to be a lot more fast paced and exciting with the just general gameplay. The last thing I'll mention before I start getting into the characters is that every character, although they can have multiple abilities, usually activated by just crouching or holding the walk key or something like that, or maybe walk and use or walk and zoom, each character also has a bind 1 and a bind 2 ability, which are their main abilities. These are used with keys that you bind yourself using the dev console, which is sadly a reason why a lot of people don't end up using these abilities, is because they're a little bit nervous to go through the trouble of trying to set up these binds. But you can bind it with whatever your keys you want. I have them bind to Q and T. So if I press Q, I use my bind 1, and T, I use my bind 2. And your bind 1 and bind 2 are two abilities that you get 3 uses of each per game, regardless of which character you are. Like if you switch characters as a zombie, but you've already used a bind 2 that game, you still only get 2 more bind 2s with the rest of the zombies that you can pick. But yes, the bind 1 and bind 2 tend to be more powerful abilities, but of course you're limited to only 3 a round. And every single zombie and every single survivor has 2 of them. The only zombie that doesn't have 2 of those is tanks, who don't have any binds. Actually, I have a little correction to make here. You can no longer take explosive ammo at the start of a game. The game was just recently updated to remove that. People just found it annoying. So yeah, not great timing, but now you know. Originally, I was just going to read off the attributes that the different characters had in order, tell you what all 6 of them are, what they would do when you had 5 levels invested in them, and talk about it like that. But as I mentioned before, it's kind of confusing talking about it that way, especially since what it says on the menus is only 1/5 of what you get, and you have to times that by 5 to get the real one. And the point at which I decided actually I really don't want to do it this way, even though it's the way it's shown in the menus, is the point at which I realized there were some abilities which would do the same thing twice. You would have to add together the 2 benefits they give to get the real benefit. So that just seems like it's going to confuse you more than it's going to help you if I try to explain it in that way. So I'm actually just going to go through Bill's different benefits one at a time in my own categories and not worry about the way it's formatted in the menus. Because a good example is one of Bill's attributes will give him +5 maximum health for every level you invest in it, which means that when you've got 5 levels in it, he'll have +25 health, meaning he'll have 125 health. But the thing is, Bill has 200 health when you're full level, because he also has another attribute, which gives you 15 health when you invest levels in it and does a bunch of other stuff as well. And obviously it seems very misleading of me to say, okay, this one gives you 25 extra health, and then have another one later and say this one gives you 75 extra health, and then you have to remember that I said both of those and add them together and say, okay, so Bill has 200 health. Seems like a much better idea for me to just not do it that way and to just talk about his benefits one at a time. So despite being labeled as a medic in the menu, Bill is actually more comparable to an all-round kind of soldier character that's good for beginners to pick up, which is of course why he's the first option and why he's labeled easy in the menu. Honestly, it's kind of funny. Soldier 76 is a very good comparison to give you an idea of what I'm on about. He's absolutely not a healer, but he does technically have an ability that lets him heal. He's good with his guns, and he's able to sprint, and he's even got a special ability that's basically a bomb. It all fits very well. So anyway, getting into what he actually does, let's first talk about the stat boosts. And just in terms of pure numbers, not even abilities or anything. How is he better? Well, first of all, if you're full level, Bill will have 200 health instead of the normal 100. If you have more than that, it's likely because of another survivor that we'll get to later, and not a glitch. Probably, at least. And if you have less than that, then you're probably not level 30, so just remember that you would only get the full benefit if you were max level. He would have 200 health to start with. He will also reload 8% faster with all weapons, but the main thing you're supposed to use with Bill is assault rifles. AK-47, the Scar, the other one that has 50 bullets and very low recoil that I don't know the name of. Thingy, stuff like that. You will deal 20% more damage when using those, but much more importantly, you will reload twice as fast. And I'm not sure, but I think that would stack with the 8% faster reload speed with everything else, which would mean you're technically reloading at 216% the speed, which is pretty fast. It's really useful actually, and I would say it surprised me when I came back to Bill, because I hadn't played him much because, well, you know, he's a beginner character, so I played him when I started, and then I kind of stopped playing him. And when I came back to him to make this video, I had to admit I've forgotten how nice it was to reload that fast, and now I would say that might even be the main draw to playing Bill now, is having good weapons that you could reload with so fast. Not to mention that he also gets an extra 100 bullets per clip with his assault rifles as well. So even if reloading was an issue, you can shoot for a long time without needing to reload with Bill. Even if you have a weapon that would usually not have too much ammo in a clip before you'd have to reload, again, you've got at least 100. As well as that, the M60, I believe it's called, machine gun, he will also deal double damage with that, although I would recommend sticking to the assault rifles if you can. You may think it seems a little weird that Bill is the starter character for most people and is intended to be like that when he's a medic, and usually medics get picked on by other teams and, you know, are destroyed for being less able to defend themselves unless they have a good team to hold them up, which means that usually medics are more difficult to play. But I mentioned before already, I feel like he doesn't serve much as a medic, and I will be making a video in future where I talk about the balance and design of all the characters in XP mod and what I would do. And I was mostly thinking in that video to less talk about Bill needing buffs or nerfs and more just a rework to be more like a medic. But either way, you may think that you'd become a target if you pick Bill, but one thing that really helps with that and actually makes him very nice for beginners is that Bill is the only character that makes himself hard to see. He is 73% invisible. I know that sounds strange, but when I say that, I mean see-through. So that is to both your teammates and the zombies, unfortunately, but still. It means that it's much harder for zombies to see you. And you may be like, oh, but what about your glow? They'll just see your glow. Well, it also partially hides your glow. Now, it is still visible, but only just, which means that it's very, very easy for zombies to not notice you, and not necessarily just because they're dumb, like even experienced players it can happen to. Sometimes when I've been a hunter, I'll catch someone alone in a room and I'll pounce on them as quick as I can before they can leave and get back to their teammates, and then I'll find out there's been a Bill crouching in the corner of that room the whole time that I just didn't see. It can happen sometimes, especially if you as an infected feel like you have to make a quick attack or you'll lose your opportunity. It's not that uncommon for them to jump on someone only to realize there's a Bill standing right next to them they didn't see. So it's more useful than you'd think, even though usually, obviously, it doesn't give a very overt advantage. It's kind of hard to notice what it does. But it's a nice thing for beginners to have, and again, as I say, it probably does more than you think. Getting into the support that Bill provides when you pick him for your team, he mostly helps people who are already down. First of all, himself, in that he will have an extra 250 health when downed, so he'll, instead of starting with 300, he'll have 550, so he can live a little bit longer before fully dying, and give his teammates a bit more of a chance to bring him back, which is again nice for beginner players. But also, more importantly, he will give every single person on the team the ability to crawl while downed, including himself. And if you have multiple Bills on your team, you can increase the speed at which you can crawl. So that can obviously be used in like some situations where you would usually never be able to get someone because there's just too many commons in the way, or there's spitter acid or whatever, and they could just crawl right over to you. And especially when it comes to like bits where there's a one-way bit where like maybe you have to jump over a fence and you can't get back after you go over it. If someone gets down on the other side, sometimes they can crawl and just drop down to where you are, and you won't have to leave them behind. And while crawling, you can't be stopped by common infected, so as I say, it is very useful if there's a horde that's downed you to be able to crawl through the horde to get to your teammates to revive you. A couple miscellaneous benefits he'll provide for the team. First of all, any weapon you pick up with Bill will gain a laser sight, so you don't have to worry about finding those or setting it as your equipment. But there's also a little extra thing which isn't that helpful in a real game, but if you're starting out, obviously it's helpful. If you have a Bill on your team, then whenever one of your teammates kills a special infected, and I believe that does include you get a bonus 50 XP to help you level up faster. So enough about all these passive benefits. What about his abilities? Well, let's get into the healing, and one last passive thing that's healing related. First of all, if one of your teammates goes down while you're Bill, you will instantly gain 30 health to help you get them up. But as well as that, you can heal your teammates by crouching. While you crouch as Bill, every 6 seconds you will regenerate 5 health randomly to other players, but not you, so you can't heal yourself. That may sound kind of bad to you, that you only get to regenerate 5 health every 6 seconds, so less than 1 health a second, and you have to be crouched the whole time too, so you can't move around easily while doing this. And yeah, it kind of is. This is where my problem with Bill comes up, at least the way he is now, is that he's labeled as a medic, but his healing is so slow, it isn't really practical. Now, I imagine there's good reasons for this. I can imagine that having an infinite source of healing with no limit, even if it is this slow, could potentially be scary. Like, you know, you don't use up a med kit, you don't use up pills, and there's no limit to how long you can just crouch and heal. But I feel like that's kind of refuted by the point that, like, the meta in XP mod is to keep moving. You can have teamwork and all that as long as you just don't stay in the same spot. Staying in the same spot will always lead to death. It's one of those things, like, in normal Left 4 Dead, you probably think, oh, that's just exaggerating, like, you just don't go too slow and all that. But no, in XP mod, because of the extra aggressive abilities the infected are given, it's very easy, if you stay in one spot, those infected to make sure you never get further than that spot. The more time you give them to prepare for the moments ahead of you, the worse it will get for you. So having to crouch and slow down just to excruciatingly slowly heal your teammates is just very impractical. You would only do it if you were ahead and you were letting your teammates catch up, or if you were already in a spot where you couldn't move until something happened, like, you know, a horde event where you're waiting for something to happen before you can leave. If you're not in one of those situations, you should basically never be using this healing. The only other time I could potentially think is if you have a teammate who's limping because of their low health and you heal them just so they can start to walk a bit faster, and then it could be useful. But as I say, for the most part, the healing is sadly not too useful, but there's no cost to it. So if you were in a position where you can be crouching anyway and it doesn't matter, then crouch and help your teammates out. Now, one of the redeeming abilities for Bill, in my opinion, is his sprint, which is activated by holding down the walk key. It's not like you hold down the walk key and you sprint. You have a sprinting device, and holding down the walk key will start to power it on, and you'll see it saying charging sprinting device in a percentage. So for a bit, you do have to walk extremely slowly to charge it, but then once you've charged it, it goes off, and for a certain amount of time, Bill will move way faster than normal. I don't know the exact numbers because it doesn't say anywhere, but I would say around triple, I guess. You move a lot faster. And this is very helpful because, as I mentioned before, in XP mod, getting stuck in the same spot is going to be a death sentence for a team. And so it means that you're a lot less likely to get left behind as a Bill left behind and end up dead, because if you do get left behind, you can usually catch up using the sprinting device. It is a little bit slow to recharge, and it does need to recharge, so it's not something that you can really speed run with as much as you can with other characters, which will be better if you were just going to run for the end. Certainly if you were already close to the end, then Bill's a good candidate to run ahead and see if you can get someone in the safe room if you're not all going to make it and you know that. But we're forgetting something important, of course, his binds. His first bind is actually kind of situational, although there is one use that is very common for it. What it'll do is it will drop down a whole bunch of pipe bombs, but the pipe bombs don't actually attract common infected. They just do a whole bunch of damage. They take a bit to explode, but when they explode, obviously, they will deal quite a lot of damage. This isn't a very useful bind typically, because it's very hard to actually hit things with it, because you have to know that something is going to be in the path of the explosion in a few seconds, and also the explosion can hurt you, so you have to make sure that you're not in the explosion when it happens. It's difficult to use against commons, which are predictable, because even though you know where they're probably going to be, so it's easier to guess when they're going to touch the explosion. There's going to be a whole lot of them, and it's hard to know if you're going to be able to get out of the way of the explosion before it goes off. And if you're going for special infected, well, obviously human players probably aren't going to walk right into the explosion. So you may be like, oh, this seems like a kind of useless bind. This is the redeeming factor of it. You can use it while you're grabbed. There's a decent amount of binds where you're not allowed to use them if you're already grabbed by an infected, but this one you are, which means that if there's a hunter pounced on you, you can just drop a bunch of bombs in place, and that hunter just has to sit there and wait for the bombs to go off and kill him. Now, the bombs do take a bit to go off, so it won't just save you every time you get grabbed, because if you are already low enough health, by the time the bombs save you, you might be downed already. Especially because you are probably going to take damage from the explosion too, since, you know, you're on top of it. If you had a lot of health and you use the bind early, you can use it to save yourself, because it's a useful bind to have, even though it is definitely one of the weaker ones. At the very least, although Bill has some pretty weak binds overall, I suppose it's not bad that Bill is the one with weak binds, considering that you have to set up your binds in XP mod, which a lot of people don't bother to do, especially if they're new. And, you know, he is supposed to be the character for the new people, so at least the new people aren't missing out on anything extremely important to the character, to playing them correctly. Now, this is where things get a bit weird, because you might have expected that Bill's bind 2 would be something to do with healing or reviving, because he's a medic, but no, it's another weapon related one. And this is why I say that he's much more like a soldier class than a medic class, because both of his binds are very firepower related. They're all about dealing damage, and I think his bind 2 is one of the least useful binds in the game, to be honest, but I will tell you what it does. It instantly grants you an M60 machine gun, the big machine gun that you don't need to reload. You just start firing with it. Now, you may be like, well, what's wrong with that? Like, isn't that a good gun? Well, one, it runs out of ammo quite quick, and when you use this ability, because it's a primary weapon, it forces you to drop your primary weapon. So you lose the weapon you had, unless you can remember exactly where you left it, and you're able to go back to where you dropped it and pick it up without dying, or, you know, forcing your team to wait for ages for you. You'd have to go through all that to get your weapon back, and obviously that would have to be after you've used up all the ammo in it. Or you just have to leave the weapon, and then after you run out of ammo with the M60, which probably won't take long, you are going to have no ammo. You will have to use your melee, and you won't have any guns, which is pretty bad. Now, to be fair, that is also kind of negated by the fact that you can use this 3 times a game, like you can with any bind. So you do get 3 M60s, so you probably won't run out of ammo entirely. But still, it's not ideal, especially because, honestly, you would rather just have an assault rifle than an M60 most of the time. The only thing that I think you'd rather have the M60 is against a tank, I guess. Because I mentioned before, the assault rifles are the ones that get all the buffs for Bill. Usually the assault rifles are better to stick with, especially for the fast reload, and the kind of nice precision you get with them in general. It's not even like a Bill buff, it's just like, if you've got hordes of common infected, all of them are going to die in one bullet. You're more concerned about hitting those bullets and fire them as fast as you can than you would be about how much damage they do in that case. That makes the bind pretty useless, but you may still be thinking, oh, but the M60 is a pretty good gun, right? Like, shouldn't you want that? Wouldn't that usually be better than the weapon you're holding if you don't get an assault rifle? But you might have remembered from the beginning, I told you that in XP mod, whenever you play as a survivor, you can choose your starting equipment. If you wanted to have an M60, you could literally just pick it as your starting gun. Like, go ahead. You don't have to use a bind for that. So it feels very weird that we have a bind that exists only to give you a gun, which you can give yourself for free at the start of the game. It's like, what is the point of that? I don't know, but I feel like almost this may be like something that is kind of an old feature that kind of became obsolete. Like, I don't know this, but since Bill is the first character in the menu, I imagine he was the first developed. And if he was the first developed, maybe when he was added, XP mod was very different. Maybe you couldn't pick your starting gun like you can now, and maybe that was actually very cool being able to get an M60 whenever you wanted. But I'd definitely say now I'd want to see that replaced, and this is something that I was hoping to keep out of this video and put in my design video, but I have to get this off my chest because this bind really nags me. I think that Bill could have some really cool bind twos, and this ain't it, Chief. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like the music that was playing throughout this video, it was actually made by me. In my second channel, Technocosm, you can find the dubstep that I make. But most of the music that played in this video in particular, you can't find on there right at the moment because it's for a little project of mine. I'm going to be working on my own game that is inspired by a lot of Earthbound likes, like Undertale and Amori and stuff like that. Nothing I expect to be done anytime soon, but I want to start working on it so that I can eventually get to it. I've been using a lot of the music that I've been making for that game in this video, although the music you are listening to now is something that is available for download on my Newgrounds account as well. Any of the music that I make you can also use for levels in Geometry Dash, if any of you here play Geometry Dash. So yes, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.